Waitress finds a bloodstained letter in the billionaire's wallet. His reaction made the whole cafe freeze. What if a single piece of paper, stained with someone's blood, could change two strangers' lives forever? Claire Patterson had been wiping down tables at Murphy's Corner Cafe for 8 years, but she'd never seen anything quite like what tumbled out of that expensive leather wallet. The crimson stains had faded to rust brown, and the handwriting was shaky, desperate. As she unfolded the letter with trembling fingers, the morning sun streaming through the cafe's dusty windows seemed to dim. The words she read made her heart skip a beat, and suddenly the wealthy man in the corner booth, the one who'd been coming in every Tuesday for months, looked completely different to her. Some secrets are too heavy to carry alone, and some coincidences feel too planned to be random. Claire's hand shook as she glanced toward the man who'd unknowingly dropped his wallet, wondering if she should return it or keep reading the letter that might explain why he always sat alone, staring out the window with such sadness in his eyes. "Where are you watching from today?" Claire had always prided herself on remembering her regular customers. At 36, she perfected the art of making everyone feel welcome at Murphy's Corner Cafe, from the construction workers grabbing coffee at dawn to the elderly couples sharing afternoon pie. But James Mitchell was different. He'd started coming in 6 months ago, always ordering black coffee and wheat toast, always leaving a $20 tip on a $7 meal, and always carrying himself like someone who'd forgotten how to smile. The cafe buzzed with its usual Tuesday morning energy. Old Pete argued politics with anyone who'd listen, while Martha from the flower shop next door nursed her third cup of coffee and worked on crossword puzzles. Steam rose from fresh pancakes, and the familiar hum of conversation filled the space like a warm blanket. Claire loved these mornings. They reminded her why she'd stayed at Murphy's even when bigger restaurants had offered her better money. This place had heart. James sat in his usual corner booth, scrolling through his phone with a detached expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. Claire had often wondered about him. His clothes were clearly expensive, perfectly tailored suits that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His watch caught the light whenever he reached for his coffee cup. Everything about him screamed wealth. Yet he seemed so isolated, so careful not to make eye contact or engage in small talk. She'd been refilling the sugar dispensers when she heard the wallet hit the floor with a soft thud. James had rushed out after taking a phone call, his face tight with stress, leaving his usual 20 on the table but forgetting the slim leather wallet that had slipped from his jacket pocket. Claire bent to retrieve it, planning to catch him in the parking lot, when it fell open in her hands. That's when she saw it, a folded piece of paper tucked behind his credit cards, its edges stained with what looked unmistakably like dried blood. Her nursing school training from 15 years ago kicked in immediately. She recognized the color, the way blood darkened and browned over time. Someone had written this letter while bleeding. Curiosity warred with respect for privacy as she stood there in the empty cafe. Pete had left for his doctor's appointment. Martha was helping a customer at her shop, and even Joe, the owner, had stepped out for his morning cigarette. She was completely alone with this mystery. The letter felt fragile in her hands, as if it might crumble at any moment. Through the thin paper, she could make out careful handwriting, each word formed with obvious effort. The blood stains were concentrated near the bottom, as if whoever had written this had been growing weaker with each line. Claire glanced toward the parking lot, but James's black sedan was already gone. She looked down at the wallet again, noting his driver's license photo, the same serious expression she'd grown accustomed to, but somehow young in the official picture, less burdened. Behind the license, she spotted a small photo of a young boy with James's same dark eyes, grinning at the camera with the unguarded joy only children possess. Who was this man, really? And what had happened to make him carry a blood-stained letter like some kind of sacred artifact? Claire's hands trembled as she carefully unfolded the letter. The handwriting was shaky, each word clearly written with tremendous effort. At the top, in faded blue ink, were the words, "My dearest James," and at the bottom, a signature that made her breath catch, "All my love, Dad." The letter was brief, but every word felt heavy with meaning. "Son, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I know we haven't spoken since the argument about the business, and I know you blame me for choosing work over family. You were right. I missed too much. Your graduation, your first job, the day you bought your house. I thought providing money was the same as providing love. I was wrong. The blood on this paper is mine. The doctors say I don't have long, and you won't return my calls. I understand why. But please know that every dollar I earned was meant to give you a better life. I just forgot to give you a better father along the way. I'm proud of who you became, not because of me, but despite me. Find someone to love, James. Don't make my mistakes. Don't die alone like I am." Claire's eyes filled with tears as she reread the final lines. Below the signature, there was a date, just over a year ago. She thought about James's weekly visits, his isolation, the way he stared out the window as if watching for someone who would never come. Now she understood the weight he carried in his shoulders, the reason he seemed so disconnected from the world around him. The cafe door chimed, and Mrs. Rodriguez came in for her usual Tuesday special. Claire quickly folded the letter and slipped the wallet into her apron pocket, trying to compose herself as she took the older woman's order. But her mind kept returning to those words, "Don't die alone like I am." She'd seen that kind of grief before. When her own mother had passed 5 years ago, Claire had carried guilt for months about their last conversation, a silly argument about Claire's decision to stay in their small town instead of moving to the city. The Waitress could eat you alive if you let them. As the lunch crowd began filtering in, Claire found herself watching the door, hoping James would return for his wallet soon. She wanted to see his face when she handed it back, to look for signs of the pain she now knew he carried. The letter explained so much: why he never seemed to enjoy his expensive clothes or fancy watch, why he left such generous tips as if money meant nothing to him, why he chose to eat alone in a small cafe instead of the upscale restaurant someone of his wealth could easily afford. The truth hit her like a punch to the stomach. James was punishing himself. He was living the life his father had described, successful, wealthy, and completely alone. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Claire made a decision that surprised even her. Instead of simply returning the wallet when James came back, she was going to do something she'd never done before. She was going to break the careful boundaries between waitress and customer. Because sometimes, when life gives you a glimpse into someone's deepest pain, staying silent becomes the cruelest choice of all. The next morning, James didn't come in. Claire found herself checking the door every few minutes, the weight of his wallet in her apron pocket feeling heavier with each passing hour. She'd barely slept, replaying the letter's words and imagining the conversation they needed to have. How do you tell someone you've read their most private pain? How do you bridge that gap between stranger and confidant? Wednesday arrived with no sign of James. Claire called the number on his business card, Mitchell Investment Group, but his assistant said he was out of the office. By Thursday, she was genuinely worried. She'd never realized how much she'd looked forward to his quiet presence in the corner booth until it was gone. Friday morning brought a surprise. James walked in, but he looked terrible, unshaven, his usually perfect suit wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. He slumped into his usual booth and buried his face in his hands. Claire approached slowly, her heart hammering. "James, I have something that belongs to you." He looked up, and she was shocked by the raw vulnerability in his expression. "My wallet," he said quietly. "I've been looking everywhere. I thought I'd lost it at the office, but—" "You dropped it Tuesday morning," Claire said gently. She pulled the wallet from her pocket, but didn't hand it over immediately. "James, I need to tell you something. When I picked it up, it fell open, and I saw the letter." The color drained from his face. For a moment, she thought he might bolt from the cafe. Instead, he seemed to deflate, his shoulders sagging under an invisible weight. "You read it," he said. "It wasn't a question. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have, but—" Claire slid into the seat across from him, something she'd never done before. "Your father loved you. Whatever happened between you two, that letter makes it clear how much he regretted your argument." James's hands clenched on the table. He loved his business more. 40 years of 12-hour days, missed birthdays, canceled vacations. When I finally confronted him about it, I told him I was tired of competing with spreadsheets for his attention, and he said I was ungrateful, said everything he'd built was for me. His voice cracked slightly. The last thing I said to him was that I didn't want his money or his legacy. I just wanted a father. "And he died before you could take it back," Claire said softly. "Heart attack. At his desk at 11 p.m. on a Sunday." James looked out the window, his jaw tight. His secretary found him on Monday morning. He'd been trying to call me all weekend. I saw the missed calls and ignored them because I was still angry. He turned back to Claire, and she saw the full depth of his guilt. He wrote that letter in the hospital. The doctors said he must have known he was dying. He bled on it because his hands were shaking so badly from medications. The cafe seemed to hold its breath around them. Even the usual morning chatter had died down, as if sensing the sacred nature of their conversation. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. Claire reached across the table and gently placed a hand over his. He forgave you, James. The letter proves that. The question is, can you forgive yourself? James stared down at their joined hands, and Claire could see 20 years of pain warring with the possibility of hope in his expression. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't know how, he whispered. Every day for the past year, I've come here because it's the opposite of everything he built. No power lunches, no networking, no business deals. Just ordinary people living ordinary lives. I thought if I could learn to be normal, maybe I could figure out how to live with what I'd done. Claire's heart broke for him. Oh, James, you've been trying to become someone else instead of healing who you already are. She glanced around the cafe, at Mrs. Rodriguez sharing photos of a new grandbaby with Joe, at Pete teaching a young father how to change a tire through the window, at Martha writing birthday cards to her customers. You know what I see here every day? Forgiveness. Pete's son died in Afghanistan, but he still mentors every young man who walks through that door. Martha's husband left her after 30 years, but she still believes in love enough to write romance in those birthday cards. Joe lost his restaurant in the recession and had to start over with this little place, but he still treats every customer like family. James listened intently, as if hearing these observations for the first time. Your father made mistakes, Claire continued. But he raised a son who leaves $20 tips on $7 meals, who sits alone rather than hurt anyone else with his pain, who built a successful business himself but doesn't flaunt it. That didn't happen by accident. The letter, James said slowly, I've carried it for a year, but I've never really listened to what he was saying. What do you hear now? James pulled the letter from his wallet, handling it with reverence. He read silently for a long moment, then spoke quietly. Find someone to love. Don't make my mistakes. Don't die alone like I am. He looked up at Claire. He wasn't just apologizing. He was giving me permission to be different, to be better. The morning sun had shifted, casting warm light across their table. Around them, the cafe hummed with its usual gentle energy, but something had fundamentally changed in their little corner of the world. I have an idea, Claire said suddenly. What if we started small? What if instead of eating alone every Tuesday, you joined the conversation? Pete would love to argue politics with someone who actually understands economics. Martha's been trying to set up everyone in town for years. She'd be thrilled to have a new project. James almost smiled. You're talking about actually becoming part of this place. I'm talking about letting these people become part of your life, the way your father never did, but always wanted to. For the first time since she'd known him, James's expression softened into something that might, eventually, become happiness. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Would you help me? He asked quietly. I'm not sure I remember how to let people in. Claire squeezed his hand gently. We'll figure it out together, one conversation at a time. 6 months later, Claire barely recognized a man who walked into Murphy's Corner Cafe every Tuesday morning. James still wore his expensive suits, but now they seemed to fit differently, less like armor, more like the clothes of someone comfortable in his own skin. He'd grown into them rather than hiding behind them. The transformation had been gradual. It started with James asking Pete about his tomato garden, which led to a 2-hour debate about organic versus traditional farming methods. Pete had declared it the best argument he'd had in years. Martha had indeed made James her newest matchmaking project, though he gently declined her suggestions while still appreciating her motherly concern. Joe had discovered that James understood the challenges of running a business and had begun asking for advice during slow afternoons. But the biggest change was in James himself. The weight he carried in his shoulders had lifted, replaced by something Claire had never seen before, the beginning of genuine contentment. He laughed now, really laughed, when Pete told his terrible jokes. He remembered details about the other customers' lives and asked follow-up questions. He'd even started arriving a few minutes early to help Claire set up chairs when they were expecting a busy morning. The blood-stained letter remained in his wallet, but its meaning had transformed. Instead of a reminder of guilt, it had become a guidebook for a different kind of life. James had framed the last line, "Don't die alone like I am," and hung it in his office as a daily reminder of what truly mattered. "You know," James said one particularly bright Tuesday morning, sliding into what was no longer just his booth, but their booth, "I've been thinking about something." Claire looked up from wiping down the counter, noting the nervous excitement in his voice. "What's that?" "My father left me his business, but he also left me enough money to do whatever I wanted with my life. I've been running his company the same way he did, but what if I didn't have to?" "What do you mean?" James smiled, and Claire marveled at how natural the expression looked on him now. "What if I turned it into something he would have been proud of? Shorter hours, better benefits for employees, maybe even a scholarship fund for kids whose parents work too much." He paused, then added quietly, "What if I made sure no one else is to choose between providing for their family and being present for them?" Claire felt tears prick her eyes. "I think that would honor both of you, who your father was and who you become." As the morning crowd began filtering in, James stood up and did something that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. He walked over to Pete's table and sat down, immediately getting pulled into a spirited discussion about the upcoming election. Within minutes, Martha had joined them, followed by Joe during his coffee break. Claire watched from behind the counter as James became part of the fabric of the place that had helped heal him. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest acts of courage, the decision to read a letter, to reach across a table, to let strangers become friends. James had learned to carry his father's love instead of his guilt, and in doing so, had discovered that healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in the warmth of community, in the gentle wisdom of ordinary people, and in the simple act of showing up day after day until belonging feels natural again. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey of healing and hope.